Yo, what is going on, you guys? Thank you so much for tuning into this video. My name is Ryan, aka Arpit, and today we're going to be diving into Foregone for the Nintendo Switch. Yes, the developers over at Big Blue Bubble were kind enough to send me over a code so that I can give you guys my review of this game on the release date. If you guys are new here to the channel, make sure and hit that subscribe button down below and like this video if you guys love watching my reviews. But without further ado, let's get into Foregone for the Nintendo Switch. Now, in all my reviews, I like to go over just a quick background, things I liked, things I didn't like, and then my final verdict. So, what is this game all about? Well, you play as an arbiter, and this is basically a superpowered, genetically enhanced person. And yes, this is another 2D style action platformer Metroidvania type game. Now, one thing that this game definitely does the best at is the combat system. So you, as the arbiter, have two different types of weapons. You have a melee weapon and then a long range weapon, and you can use these interchangeably. I do like what they did with this because with both of the weapons, there are different rarities. So obviously when you start at the beginning of the game, you have lower rarities. And the higher rarity of weapon that you have also allows you to upgrade it more compared to those lower rarities as well. But I really like this because your character itself doesn't necessarily level up. We'll kind of get to that as well, but your weapons and the things that you use definitely level up. And on top of the two weapons, you also have trinket armor and other things like that you can upgrade to give you a better advantage in those combat situations as well. Now, one thing that I really like that they did is by attacking enemies with your melee weapon, that will give you ammunition for your long range weapon. So you can't just like spam your long range weapon and kill all your enemies that way, because that would probably be just really easy. But in fact, you can actually do a lot of really fun and cool, sick combos just by interchangeably using those on different enemies and taking down multiple enemies basically the most efficiently. So I really love how the combat system is designed. I really feel like it is super fluid and very fast paced, but also very difficult. So I do feel like at the very beginning of the game, it was somewhat easy, but then that ended very quickly for me, and it definitely increased in difficulty very fast. It also felt like your character and the enemies definitely leveled up in a very simultaneous way, I'll say. Just meaning that you never felt like at one point you were super underpowered and then all of a sudden you felt overpowered against the enemies you were combating. But then it wasn't ever like that, vice versa either. So it definitely is a good progression. You know, obviously the enemies are getting tougher, but then your character is also getting stronger, and your weapons are getting stronger. So I do feel like simultaneously the difficulty increased. And going along with your character, like I mentioned before, you have a skill tree as well that you are using these different rubies to use. I believe they're called rubies. But they're basically diamonds, something like that, to be able to level up your actual character. So you collect gold and these diamonds, rubies, currency, whatever, to use the gold to upgrade your weapons, armor, things like that. But then you have the diamonds and rubies, whatever they're called, to upgrade your character. And so you have like a different skill tree that you can use to upgrade both your character and different abilities that you have at your disposal. And one thing I actually liked about it is there's basically three parts of the skill tree, and depending on what type of extra added attack or extra added effect you want your character to have, you will choose a specific path for your arbiter. And kind of last thing with character upgrades that we will jump into are the abilities that I mentioned before. And these also tailor your playstyle because you can only hold 2 abilities at a time, but I believe there are either 8 or 10 abilities that you come across that you have the ability to choose and use throughout your play. I think for me, there were almost too many abilities to choose from, just because with only being able to use 2, and having 4 to 5 times as many as that were available. I honestly ended up just using some of the first ones because those were the ones that I upgraded first. Last thing I'll touch on for the positives, and kind of going into some of the things that I think needed a little work, is I really do like how the game looks. Each enemy definitely, even with this type of art style and sort of that retro 2D style game, I do feel like it looks really well done. Even the things just like the chests that you come across that you can destroy for gold, they look really well done. And I feel like the enemies themselves actually look really good. So in those ways, I think the game looks really good, and the game runs very, very well for the most part. Now, I will say there were a couple of frame dips, mostly when I was either in a space with a lot of enemies and they were all attacking me at the same time. The second one was definitely during the boss battles, sort of at the end of the boss battle when there's a little bit more going on. And definitely when I finally defeat the boss, there's definitely like a big sort of like hiccup at that point, because that's really just the game trying to save. And so that's also where that was the third time I saw those frame dips, was during the different save points when you hit these teleporters that will save your game. And so those aren't big things because, well, 2 out of the 3 aren't a big deal because you're not like encountering enemies or trying to attack enemies, precisely. So the frame dip doesn't necessarily matter at that point. And I don't even know if I would necessarily say they were frame dips, but almost like just a slowdown at the very least. So nothing huge necessarily, but there were those kinds of things that definitely impacted and took me out of the experience just a tiny bit. Now, other than those things, honestly, the only other sort of negative thing that I would say about this game is that because of the genre, there are so many of these types of games on the Switch already. It is definitely a Metroidvania style game, and so if you are not a fan of that genre, or if it's a genre that you feel like you've exhausted with other games, then this is another game that definitely fits within that same mold. So it might be something that you might want to avoid, or maybe at least wait for a sale on the game before you pick it up. Now let's get into my final verdict. So with all of my final verdicts, I definitely like to take into account the price point of the game with the, obviously, quality of content. Now this game you will find on the eShop for $29.99. And I will say at that price, it feels a tiny bit overpriced. And the only reason I will say that is because for me, I haven't reached the very end of the game just yet, but I am very close, and I am roughly 6 hours in or so. And so some people may find that to be somewhat of a short experience for $30. However, saying that, this is a game that actually surprised me. I definitely thought I was going to enjoy this game, but just the fluidity of the combat, it really hooked me in for sure. The story itself, honestly, didn't even really hook me, at least not in the beginning. But I absolutely found myself hooked just wanting to find the different combinations of attacks with both the close and long range weapons. One thing I really like that I didn't touch on so much is that there are definitely different types of weapons that you come across that play totally different from its counterparts. So those kinds of things I really loved, and those were the things that really hooked me in. It's always cool finding a new weapon and coming across new enemies and just figuring out how to work that so that I can stay alive in the first place. But then just find those really cool combos. But in all that being said, I would definitely give this game an 8.5 out of 10. I think there's enough fun to be had in this game that the $30 price point isn't a big enough issue for me to not want to recommend this game for others. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure and hit the like button and subscribe if you guys are new here to the channel as well. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.